President Biden's message at the G7 and NATO has been America is back. But some Western allies are rattled by 4 years of Donald Trump and the political polarization in the U.S. And they're wondering whether the Biden policies that he's been putting out here can even survive the next election, a question that the president was asked last night.
The leaders I'm dealing with in NATO and the G7 are leaders who know our recent history, know generically the character of the American people, and know where the vast center of the public stands. I think it is a shock and surprise that what's happened in terms of the consequence of President Trump's phony populism has happened.
Joining me now is New York Times Chief White House Correspondent Peter Baker, former Republican National Chairman Michael Steele, and also back with us my colleague and friend, NBC News Capitol Hill correspondent Casey Hunt. Peter, in your experience, other than Donald Trump, do American presidents talk about their political opponents while they're overseas getting ready for a big summit?
No, not a lot, obviously. That was something that an old-fashioned rule that went by the wayside the last 4 years. But you're right. I mean, presidents historically have tried to, focus on their international policies when they're overseas and not bring their domestic rivalries into the fray. But I think what you see here is President Biden trying to explain, in effect, his challenge in reestablishing relationships with allies, given the context of the last 4 years and given the context of his predecessor. So that's the linkage he's making. But you're right. These days there is no real edge. There is no border. There is no boundary between domestic and international politics. It follows the president wherever he goes, and he brings it with him.
And, Michael, between President Trump's role in January 6th, Republicans are questioning the election, of course, in all these states, passing discriminatory voting restrictions. Is it surprising that our allies would be concerned about whether the Trump-dominated Republican Party is going to get back in power, retake the House in the midterms, or elect a new president, or even Trump get reelected?
Yeah, I think they are concerned, and I think they should be concerned because, as the political gods may play this out, a Republican, certainly a Donald Trump, candidacy could emerge in 2024. And there we are again having to deal with this party that, has taken a course that is anti-democratic in many respects. And so when you're looking at it, there is a general concern about, okay, what does the two-party system in America look like if one of the parties is diverging off of what have been the stated goals and aspirations of, the NATO alliance, the G7, and our individual relationships with countries like Germany and Great Britain. So there is that beneath the surface. To Peter's point, what Biden brings to the conversation is a sense of, I know you're concerned, but let me tell you, we're not going to worry about 2024 yet. We're going to focus on what we need to do right now to shore up this alliance and to reimagine what we need to do, whether it's on issues like COVID, which is the big initiative now to get the vaccine done globally, or on other issues relative to Russia and China. So I think that there's some comfort that they take from Biden, even though beneath that surface, there's a concern about how a political race may turn out in 2022, meaning giving the House back to Republicans, and what that may say about the alliance when they get into 2024.
And Casey, it really strikes me that Joe Biden's instincts are to be bipartisan. We know that to a fault. Some in his party think too much. Covering him on the Hill as I used to. As a senator, he was always working across the aisle, and it seems as though this is kind of an indication that his skin might be a little thinner on this subject after some of the rejections on infrastructure that you've been covering so intensively.
Well, Andrea, I mean, it was, I think a little bit surprising to me that he did go as far as he did in talking about Republicans when he was on foreign soil, despite, of course, the fact that, yes, President Trump broke that norm when he was in office over and over and over again. But, I think that one of the things that he tried to focus on in his remarks especially considering the timing of the Putin meeting and how that is being set up, is that, Vladimir Putin spent 2016 trying to sow dissent among the American public. And Biden, I think, President Biden knows that unity at home is going to ultimately lead to increased national security abroad. And pushing that idea forward, I think, was part of the calculus there. And, I think Republicans back at home, there were some who grumbled and criticized him for doing that. But I think behind the scenes, privately, they'll admit that what he said is actually true, that they are divided. And you're right. I think the way in which Congress has changed since Joe Biden was a member, we talked about it during the campaign, and he has put an awful lot of faith in the idea of bipartisanship, and he has continued to say that that's what he wants to do. But I think the reality is rapidly becoming clear, especially as he's overseas, and now the left wing of his party here at home seems to be trying to essentially scuttle the bipartisan talks. That frustration has kind of exploded as his attention has been elsewhere.
No, exactly. I think your take is exactly right. Peter, in Keir Simmons' worldwide exclusive with Vladimir Putin, Keir asked the Russian president about his treatment of Alexei Navalny. And he then pivoted to January 6th, which is what we might anticipate could happen tomorrow as well. Let's listen.
Do you know that 450 individuals were arrested after entering the Congress, and they didn't go there to steal a laptop? They came with political demands. 450 people have been detained. They're looking at jail time between 15 and 25 years. And they came to the Congress with political demands. Isn't that persecution for political opinions?
So, Peter, you were Moscow bureau chief for the New York Times. That's classic Putin.
It is classic Putin. It's classic Russian. This goes back to Soviet days. Anytime they are criticized for any abuse of human rights at home, any violation of norms, they simply try to play the, both sides card, or whataboutism, what about the Americans? You guys did this, you guys did that. We heard it when we were in Moscow for 4 years repeatedly. It's classic way of trying to deflect attention. Never mind that the analogies are almost never comparable. Arresting 400 people who violently assault the Capitol is not the same thing as putting in prison, a nonviolent dissident who simply embarrasses you and who calls for opposition. These are not the same things. They're not comparable. But in the Russian scheme of things, this is always the answer to any criticism of their domestic suppression of dissent.
And Michael, after comments comparing House mask mandates to the way people were treated in the Holocaust, Republican Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene went and visited the Holocaust Museum yesterday. She then apologized for those comments on masks, but she stood by her comments comparing Democrats to Nazis.
Well, yeah, what else are you going to expect from her, right? Okay, so there's enough probably conversation with Kevin McCarthy and a few others to go, look, okay, can you just go do the bare minimum? And so, you show up at the Holocaust Museum and you say, I'm sorry, mea culpa, but you don't do the maxima culpa, which is the rest of it. And that's, where you get I'm not going to back off of the fact that Democrats are Nazis. So this is what we expect in the land of Marjorie Taylor Greene.